Bonhoeffer was right. Stupidity has become the new global pandemic. Picture this. You're standing in a dimly lit prison cell in 1943 Berlin. The air is thick with desperation and the distant sound of Allied bombs falling on Nazi Germany. Across from you sits a man barely 37 years old, hunched over yellowed sheets of paper, writing with an urgency that suggests he knows his time is running out. This isn't just any prisoner. This is Dietrich Bonhoeffer, a Lutheran pastor whose observations about human nature would prove to be among the most chilling prophecies of our time. As the Third Reich crumbles around him, Bonhoeffer isn't fixated on Hitler's evil or the brutality of SS officers. Instead, he's consumed by something far more disturbing, something he's witnessed transform his neighbors, his university colleagues, members of his own church congregation. He's watched intelligent, educated, well-meaning people become willing accomplices to history's most efficient killing machine. And his conclusion will shake you to your core. Humanity's greatest threat isn't evil. It's stupidity. But before we dive deeper into this revelation that could fundamentally change how you see the world around you, I want to ask you something. If what you're hearing resonates with you, if you feel like these words are arriving at exactly the moment you need to hear them, I'd love for you to subscribe to our channel. Because what you're about to discover isn't just a history lesson, it's an urgent wake-up call about what's happening right now in your community, in your workplace, maybe even in your own mind. From his prison cell, Bonhoeffer penned words that now read like a warning from the future. Stupidity is a more dangerous enemy of the good than malice. Against evil, one can protest, it can be exposed and prevented by force. Against stupidity, we are defenseless. But he wasn't talking about the obvious ignorance we all recognize, that kind we can point to and dismiss. No, he was describing something infinitely more sinister, a functional stupidity that transforms brilliant minds into blind instruments of destructive systems. Think about your daily interactions. How often have you encountered someone with advanced degrees, years of experience, an impressive track record, passionately defending ideas they've never actually examined? How many times have you witnessed intelligent people parroting talking points they heard on television or social media, never questioning where these concepts originated or who benefits from their spread? How many times have you caught yourself sharing an opinion simply because it sounded reasonable, because everyone around you believed it, because it aligned with what was considered acceptable at the moment? This is Bonhoeffer's stupidity in action. It's not the absence of intelligence, it's the abandonment of critical thinking. It's the surrender of individual consciousness to the comfort of collective narratives. It's that precise moment when we stop being authors of our own thoughts and become unwitting actors reciting scripts written by others. In 1951, a Polish-American psychologist named Solomon Asch conducted an experiment that would validate Bonhoeffer's insights in the most terrifying way imaginable. Asch gathered groups of people for what appeared to be a simple vision test. The task seemed straightforward. Identify which of 3 lines matched the length of a reference line. The correct answer was obvious to anyone with functioning eyes. But there was a trap the main participant didn't know about. Everyone else in the group was secretly instructed to give wrong answers deliberately. The results shattered our understanding of human nature. Over 70% of participants yielded to group pressure at some point, deliberately choosing the incorrect answer just to avoid standing out, just to avoid appearing different, just to belong. They preferred being wrong with the crowd to being right alone. This experiment didn't just confirm Bonhoeffer's observations, it demonstrated them in real time. It proved that our fear of social exclusion is stronger than our drive for accuracy. Our need to fit in, to avoid standing out, to not seem weird, can drive perfectly intelligent people to abandon their own judgment. And this is where the story becomes deeply personal, where it stops being a tale from the past and becomes a mirror reflecting our present reality. Because that group pressure, that conformist drive, that abandonment of critical thinking, it didn't disappear when World War II ended. It evolved. became more sophisticated, more invisible. Today we live in the age of algorithmic stupidity. Every time you unlock your phone, every time you browse the internet, every time you consume content on any digital platform, artificial intelligence systems are measuring your reactions, analyzing your emotions, predicting your next clicks. These algorithms aren't designed to make you smarter. They're engineered to make you more predictable. And to become predictable, you first have to stop thinking for yourself. Social media algorithms have discovered something that 20th century propagandists could only dream of. The most effective way to control what you think isn't by censoring what they don't want you to see, but by flooding you with more of what you already believe. They feed you exactly what you want to hear, validating your prejudices, reinforcing your biases, creating a confirmation bubble so perfect that you never have to confront an idea that challenges your worldview. The result is a society of people who believe they're incredibly well-informed because they consume massive amounts of information, but who are actually less capable of critical reasoning than previous generations. We live in an era where having access to all human knowledge in our pocket has paradoxically coincided with a decline in independent reasoning ability. Modern stupidity doesn't need dictators in uniforms with mustaches. It has friendly influencers, charismatic hosts, invisible algorithms. It doesn't impose, it seduces, it doesn't threaten, it promises. It doesn't punish different thinking, it simply makes it irrelevant, burying it under tons of content designed to distract and emotionally manipulate. But there's something even more disturbing about all this. Contemporary stupidity isn't just functional, it's profitable. Every minute you spend without thinking critically, every decision you make based on emotional impulses, every purchase you complete without reflection, every vote you cast without examination, every opinion you share without questioning, it generates revenue for someone. Your stupidity literally fuels an attention economy that feeds on your inability to think for yourself. Stanley Milgram, another psychologist who studied obedience mechanisms, demonstrated in 1961 just how far ordinary people will go when a legitimate authority tells them to act. In his infamous experiment, 65% of participants administered potentially lethal electric shocks to another human being, simply because a man in a white coat told them it was necessary for science. The participants sweated, trembled, protested, but they obeyed. They weren't sadists, they weren't monsters, they were people just like you and me who had transferred their moral responsibility to an authority figure. They had stopped being independent moral agents and become instruments of someone else's will. This experiment repeats itself daily in subtler but equally effective forms. Every time you share news without verifying it, because it comes from a source you consider trustworthy, every time you adopt an opinion because it's defended by someone you admire, every time you support a cause because it's trendy or politically correct, you're participating in a modern version of Milgram's experiment. Let me pause here to ask you something personal. In the comments below, I'd love to hear if you've ever recognized yourself in what I'm describing. Have you ever felt like you're repeating ideas that aren't really your own? Like you're following opinion currents without knowing exactly why? Like there's an invisible pressure pushing you to think a certain way? Don't be afraid to admit it. Recognizing it is the first step toward breaking free. Modern neuroscience has discovered something both fascinating and terrifying about how our brains work. When we encounter information that challenges our established beliefs, the same brain regions that activate when we feel physical pain light up. Literally, thinking differently hurts. Changing our minds, questioning our certainties, admitting we might be wrong. It causes the same type of discomfort as a physical injury. That's why falling into functional stupidity is so easy. Because the alternative, genuine critical thinking, is biologically expensive, socially risky, and emotionally painful. It's much more comfortable to accept pre-packaged ideas, follow dominant currents, be part of the herd. But here's the problem. When an entire society chooses the comfort of groupthink over the effort of independent thought, it becomes the perfect breeding ground for any form of authoritarianism. You don't need a dictator to arrive with tanks and soldiers. Citizens have already voluntarily surrendered their capacity for critical judgment. The stupidity Bonhoeffer described wasn't passive, it was militant. The stupid person doesn't just blindly believe, they aggressively defend their beliefs without examining them. They feel morally superior for following the correct ideas, even though they have no clue why those ideas are correct. They become zealous guardians of the dominant orthodoxy, pointing out and punishing anyone who dares to think differently. We've created a society where the greatest heresy isn't blaspheming against God, but thinking independently, where the greatest crime isn't stealing or lying, but asking uncomfortable questions, where the greatest virtue isn't wisdom or compassion, but conformity to fashionable ideas. We live in an era where any attempt at deep analysis is labeled intellectual elitism, where any questioning of dominant narratives is considered dangerous conspiracy thinking, where any resistance to groupthink is interpreted as arrogance or lack of empathy. Carl Gustav Jung, the Swiss psychologist, warned about the danger of what he called the uncontrolled collective mind. Jung observed that when individuals completely merge into the mass, they lose their capacity for individual judgment and become susceptible to ideas and behaviors they would never adopt if they were thinking for themselves. Jung wrote, "The individual has become increasingly a function of society, which in turn usurps the individual function." This observation, made decades ago, perfectly describes our current reality. We've outsourced our thinking to algorithms, to influencers, to viral trends, to media authorities. The stupidity pandemic we're discussing isn't a metaphor. It's a real, measurable, observable phenomenon. It manifests in people's growing inability to hold deep conversations about complex topics. It's visible in the extreme polarization dividing society into irreconcilable camps. It's reflected in how quickly crowds adopt and abandon causes without really understanding what they're about. This pandemic feeds on our deepest insecurities, our fear of being alone, our terror of being judged, our desperate need to belong to something bigger than ourselves. Power systems have learned to exploit these vulnerabilities with surgical precision. They don't need to convince you their ideas are correct. They just need to convince you that everyone around you accepts them. They don't need you to understand their arguments. They just need you to feel that belonging to their group makes you morally superior. They don't need your admiration. They just need your obedience disguised as enthusiasm. While all this happens, those trying to maintain critical thinking capacity face growing isolation. They discover that questioning dominant narratives makes them social pariahs. That seeking truth above popularity makes them suspicious. That refusing to follow fashionable currents marks them as problematic. This is the tragedy of our time, that genuine intelligence, real curiosity, independent thinking have become forms of dissidence. That being truly rational in an irrational world automatically makes you a radical. But this is where Bonhoeffer's story becomes hopeful, because he didn't just diagnose the problem, he also showed the path toward a solution. From his Nazi prison cell, he wrote that the only defense against collective stupidity is the individual courage to keep thinking when everyone else has stopped. Bonhoeffer paid the ultimate price for his refusal to surrender to his era's stupidity. The Nazis executed him just weeks before the war's end. But his example shows us it's possible to resist, that it's possible to maintain intellectual integrity even when the whole world seems to have lost its mind. If you feel these words are touching something deep inside you, if you recognize the symptoms of this stupidity pandemic in yourself, I want you to know you're not alone. Thousands of people are awakening to this reality, recovering their capacity for critical thinking, resisting the temptation of easy conformity. The first step is recognizing that stupidity isn't just ignorance, it's intellectual cowardice. It's the refusal to face the discomfort of independent thinking. It's choosing the safety of the herd over the dangerous but liberating adventure of thinking for yourself. The second step is developing the mental discipline necessary to question everything, especially the ideas you like most. the ones that are most convenient for you, the ones that make you feel good about yourself. The most dangerous ideas aren't the ones that repel us, they're the ones that seduce us, the ones that make us feel virtuous without demanding real sacrifice. The third step is accepting that real thinking is a solitary act. You can't do it in groups, you can't do it by following leaders, you can't do it while seeking approval. You have to be willing to reach conclusions no one else shares, to defend unpopular ideas, to question authorities everyone respects. The fourth step is understanding that truth isn't democratic. It's not decided by voting, it's not established by consensus, it's not validated by popularity. The majority can be wrong, experts can lie, authorities can become corrupt. Your only reliable compass is your own capacity for critical reasoning. The fifth step is developing the emotional strength necessary to withstand the isolation that comes with independent thinking. You're going to lose friends, you're going to be misunderstood, you're going to be attacked by people who once respected you. But you're also going to gain something invaluable, the freedom to be yourself, the dignity of thinking with your own mind, the satisfaction of living according to your own convictions. Viktor Frankl, the Austrian psychologist who survived Nazi concentration camps, wrote that humanity's last freedom, the one no one can take away, is the ability to choose your attitude toward any circumstance. Even when everything else has been stripped from you, you can still choose how to interpret your experience, how to respond to it, what meaning to give it. This inner freedom is precisely what collective stupidity tries to destroy. It wants you to surrender your capacity for independent interpretation, to accept the interpretations others have prepared for you, to live according to meanings others have established for your life. But your mind remains your last bastion of freedom. No one can think for you, no one can reason for you, no one can decide for you which ideas to accept and which to reject. This responsibility is yours and yours alone, and it's both a privilege and a burden. Stupidity is comfortable because it relieves responsibility. If you're just following orders, repeating consensus, obeying authorities, then you're not responsible for the consequences. You can sleep peacefully knowing you did what was expected, what everyone did, what was normal and acceptable. But critical thinking comes with a price: total responsibility for your own ideas, decisions, and actions. You can't blame others for your mistakes. You can't hide behind majority consensus. You can't take refuge in expert authority. You're completely responsible for what you choose to believe and how you choose to act. This responsibility can be overwhelming, but it's also liberating. Because when you assume total responsibility for your own mind, you also regain total power over your own life. You stop being a victim of circumstances and become the architect of your own destiny. The battle against collective stupidity isn't won on social media. It's not won in public debates. It's not won by convincing others. It's won in the privacy of your own mind, in the solitude of your own reflections, in the brutal honesty of your self-examination. Every time you resist the temptation to adopt a popular opinion without examining it, you're winning a battle. Every time you question a respected authority, you're defending your mental freedom. Every time you admit you don't know something instead of pretending you do, you're choosing wisdom over stupidity. Bonhoeffer was right when he said we're defenseless against stupidity, but only if we understand defense as something external, something we do against others. The real defense against stupidity is internal. It's cultivating the critical mind. It's the discipline of independent thinking. It's the courage to stand alone with the truth. This isn't a battle you can win once and for all. It's a daily, constant struggle that requires permanent vigilance. Because stupidity is seductive, it's comfortable, it's socially rewarded. It will always be easier to go with the flow than swim against it. Always more comfortable to repeat than create. Always safer to obey than question. But if you've made it this far, if you've resisted the temptation to stop listening when ideas became uncomfortable, then you already have what it takes to resist. You already have the curiosity, the patience, the willingness to examine difficult concepts. You already have the basic tools to defend yourself against the stupidity pandemic surrounding us. Now the question is, what are you going to do with this knowledge? Are you going to leave it here as an interesting but inconsequential reflection? Or are you going to use it as the starting point for a profound transformation of your relationship with your own ideas? The choice is yours, and no one else can make it for you. But remember Bonhoeffer's words, stupidity doesn't need weapons to triumph. It only needs silence. It only needs people who can think to choose not to. It only needs those with the capacity to question, to choose conformity instead. If this message has resonated with you, if you feel these words have touched something important inside you, I invite you to subscribe to our channel and share this content with people who might benefit from it. Leave a comment telling me which aspects of this topic have been most relevant to you. Hit the like button if you believe this message deserves to be spread. Because the battle against stupidity is won one mind at a time, one conversation at a time, one courageous decision at a time. And you can be part of the solution. You can be one of those who chooses to think when everyone else has stopped. Humanity needs people like you. People willing to pay the price of keeping the flame of critical thinking alive in times of intellectual darkness.